So today we have with us a few of our speakers. We have Foxy, David, Jessica, and William. Looks like we're still trying to get Foxy on. But we can start with, why don't we start with William, since your talk just finished. William, thank you so much for that wonderful talk. And if you all would, let's see, are you able to turn on your video? Let's see. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So yeah, so please turn on your video and you can just unmute yourself as we go around. So William, one question that was submitted for you is, are there ethical implications of including mystical or religious iconography in the background of a psychedelic therapy setting, especially when the person undergoing the therapy is against the iconography or following another belief?
Yeah, so I guess I would say in a way, yes. So one of the things I added at the end of the talk was that religious concepts should not be introduced unsolicitedly. So I guess having that as a background, perhaps in a way, is unsolicited. So in a secular clinical setting, perhaps it's not appropriate unless the patient chooses to bring perhaps their own objects or images. I think that would be a more ethical approach to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question for Foxy.
Looks like we're still waiting for Foxy. Do you want to just
Oh,
move on,
okay.
David?
Gotcha, yes. Okay. Okay, David. So someone asked, do you think everyone will respond positively to psychedelics? How do you think is the best way to approach individual differences in responses?
Well, I think that positive responses aren't the only valid form of expression inside psychedelic group therapy sessions. In the study by the relational processes with and Palestinians with ayahuasca, Palestinian Israelis, they had negative experiences. They had anger arise during the trip, angry reactions against each other, but they were able to process that anger and reconcile it. So I guess it really depends on what we mean by positive. If positive is just the overwhelming euphoria and good emotions that we can experience under psychedelics, then yeah, that's not the only form we can have. Negative, we can have scary, bad trips is what we refer to them as, but then bad trips are also healing trips in disguise. So if the positivity is the healing and the group cohesion that can come out of it, then yes, I could say that that's the goal. That's the positivity there. But let's say we don't have that, and we have group division and group miscommunication, then that might be a key for experimental failure. But not everyone will be able to take psychedelics, but this will be if we assume, like, for our politicians, that they're able-bodied and that they're mentally well, that they could and not have like pre-existing medical or psychiatric conditions that prevent them from participating in psychedelics, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, then this could possibly be used by politicians. Like, essentially, I've been thinking of this as just like Burning Man for the United Nations. That this is a group social community ritual that involves psychedelics, um, that is for people that are able-bodied that could participate in an experience like that. Um, but then that doesn't mean that psychedelics are the only medium to get to this kind of transcendental or transpersonal um, uh, sense of connection or consciousness. I think that just music as well. We've never really thought of like music ceremonies or concerts as being something that our leaders could do. But we do see like concerts like Woodstock and so on being world peace initiatives in a way. So I think that music could be another world community ritual that would be in place of psychedelics. And there's others as well, art therapy, so on. Anything that gives out that expression inside of humans and that authenticity. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, cool. And by the way, I love your lights. Those are cool.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Jessica, since that's the next person on my screen. So the question that we have is, Burning Man usually takes days to weeks of preparation to get to, and I mean, just to get there and then also to attend. To what extent do you think the journey itself to the temple at Burning Man contributes to its healing nature?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I do think that it does contribute. I think that there is this sense of pilgrimage that different scholars have linked to the rituals that happen at Burning Man and the ritual of the temple. And even the physical placement of the temple in the city is located outside of the city. So there, which helps create more of a sacred container. So you're not just like stumbling into it amidst the party. And it also creates a necessity of some sort of pilgrimage where there's the effort needed to walk or bike there, and that it's separate. So I definitely think it contributes, and I think it contributes in different ways. I think one way is that it creates some sort of buy-in. There's an effort or an ante that has to be paid in order to utilize that service. You know, you have to contribute effort through the pilgrimage. And I also think it creates this separation from what you were doing previously. And that separation, you know, it allows for more liminality and also allows for a process of reflection as you're going into it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. It looks like Foxy's still not here, so we can go. Oh wait, hi Foxy, sorry. Question for you. Someone is asking if you could go into more details about what archetypes are, what the different archetypes are, and how they can fit into helping us achieve personal growth.
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. So what are archetypes? How to get more into that? So archetypes they were kind of coined by Jung, but they've always been there. So archetypes are this primordial embodiment of different themes and senses of awarenesses inside of our lives. And one example is like the hero archetype. We utilize that for story. So let's say if we wanted to utilize the hero archetype and you've identified with it, now how does that become a little bit constructive with your life? Well, thematically, we already have story utilizing it in our narratives for books, for movies. But the cool thing is when other archetypes come into play. So how do you transition from one archetype to another? You're noticing your life in going a particular way. And the path of the hero archetype is very structured. And so you notice it, it's like, okay, the journey is this. The journey is this. So getting outside of the hero archetype into meeting the threshold archetype. There's a threshold keeping me from this next part of my life. And that part might be related to a different archetype. Let's say the queen. And to get to this awesome side of the queen archetype, you have to do this work on yourself interpersonally, go to your therapist, understand the archetype, how it relates to you, understand the two sides and the the different sides of the archetype, because everything comes with a light and a dark aspect to it, a shadow side. Do that shadow work. That's very a transpersonal thing to actually just take into conception of how to handle these darker, more painful, more jealousy aspects of ourselves that are within a certain branch of an archetype. So to kind of reframe that, the whole idea is to utilize, well, in my opinion, transpersonal work is just like a huge expansion of humanistic perspectives into more of a more spiritual dimension, and they incorporate every other thing. And so it's like utilizing the tools before you. If archetypes are a tool to help you understand the themes and the circumstances you're going through inside of your life, then why not utilize them inside of your therapy? Why not utilize them as an artist? And you start journaling when you wake up. Maybe you start noticing themes inside of your dreams. You can totally just go so imaginal, so big, grand for yourself, and then scale it back down to something unique and small and personal, so that you can do the work on yourself. And archetypes can be a tool utilized in that space. And then you do that work, and then you get back out into the open, and you're with your friends and your family. You're like, okay, cool. I've noticed that this has been going on. Have you noticed this? And it's just very interesting where things like the archetypes might pop up in your life. One really interesting example, and I guess I'm pretty used to this kind of happening to me, and I welcome this kind of energy. So I was gifted the Wild Unknown archetypes by Kim something. I'm forgetting her name at the top of my head right now. And I haven't even opened up the deck because I've been so nervous. And I was told to kind of like start thinking of like what archetypes might be working within my body and within like my sphere of influence. And the book randomly was marked already for me with the Queen archetype. I guess that's kind of why I mentioned it. And so I've been looking into that and where it might be coming into play. And actually, now as I'm thinking about it, I could see it influencing some aspects of my worldview and some of the shadow aspects related to the Queen. Let's say the Queen is related to let them eat cake. And so that might be a shadow aspect of the Queen, rather than this benevolent entity that is nurturing, mothering, giving, but becomes a taker and a user of her subjects. So where does that fall inside of my life? And that's where the work begins.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
Looks like we have Christian who just joined us, so I will ask him a question. So here was one question we had submitted. So obviously, also as you mentioned in your talk, there are some ethical concerns with testing on or treating teens with classical psychedelic substances. Do you think that second generation or synthetic psychedelics offer a more practical or useful option for them?
That's a really good question. I don't have the expertise, and I'm not sure who might in that field, whether synthetic or natural would be advisable. I know that from my own personal experience with seeing the pros and cons in the psychedelic community, I would just say something like 5-MeO-DMT is much more controllable than the bufo toad venom, and which so synthetic might have a much tighter control on the effects. And so set and setting could be less of a factor, where if you do it with a natural substance, the only studies we have with youth are with ayahuasca. So that is a diverse brew, or it can be, in its potency and range of MAOIs to tryptamine content. And it seems like the set and setting make that even more important, because the control over the substance is less. And so I would just say, yeah, more, with all things in this subject, more research.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Thank you.
Okay, we'll circle back around to William. I actually really like this question, since I use mystical experience questionnaires in my research a lot. Someone asked, what do you think a better questionnaire for evaluating mystical experiences would entail? Or what is a better psychometric tool than what we currently use?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the metaphysics questionnaire is a good start, but I think it itself also has some limitations. I think the best approaches would be like minute, detailed phenomenology, rather than questionnaires. Having patients like write out experiences in detail, I think is a bit better than questionnaires. Obviously, it takes a lot more curated work on the part of the clinician and the therapist, but I think it can offer a much more fruitful effect for the experience in its integration phase, especially. Yeah, I hope that answers that as best as I can.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, next for David, we have a question from an audience member that just posted it in the chat. It says, Ernesto says, many thanks for your talk. We have many points in common to talk about. The question is, I do believe in group work to be a great tool for a psychedelic revolution, but there are many examples of groups linked to far-right movements, like some UDV members here in Brazil, or neo-Nazis using homemade DMT. So what do you think is the way to conduct these groups, given that psychedelics are pluripotent? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad that question was asked, because it's well, during the process of my talk, I became pretty aware that there is a heavy right-wing influence in psychedelic therapy, and also it's interesting you mentioned that he mentions the neo-Nazis, because like even the word psychonaut was coined by a Nazi. Um, so we have that as part of the psychedelic heritage. And it just makes me wonder, like, if we can do studies with Israelis and Palestinians, groups that have had massive conflict and hatred built up towards each other for generations, is it possible to have Republicans and Democrats in therapy together, conservatives and liberals? Is it possible to have, it might be extreme or dangerous, but neo-Nazis and civil rights leaders in a group therapy session under psychedelics? Is that possible? Like, is it possible to we get to this shared human experience where we're beyond ideology and beyond these rigid belief systems about what is real? What do we think is true, even though it's like the most extreme and horrible vision of reality and of other people possible? Are these people who are neo-Nazis, are they doomed to be neo-Nazis for, or is that what they are? Or are they just caught up in this very damaging belief system that needs to be medicated? It's I think it's just trying to get to that level of where we're all one on that experiential level, without identity, without culture, without belief systems, without horrible biases and prejudice and hatred. How do we get beyond? So we know with psychedelics, it's this healing power from the plant medicine that that's working. The therapists themselves, they're mostly just there for their support. So it's like a process that just gets acted out in a controlled setting. So the theory and method for how we could have even the worst just divisions of just racism and prejudice, just how can we have that medicated? That's been a serious question for me. And the fact that it's like right wing psychedelia is a thing is a concern. So that's why these we need to have a diversity of viewpoints inside these group therapy sessions to eliminate that group think, that this all what we come up with during the session is my beliefs are just being reaffirmed, even if it's my spiritual or Buddhist kind of beliefs. If that's like being reaffirmed, then I need to have those, still need to have those questioned. I need to be open-minded to other perspectives, like Christians and Buddhists like having dialogues together, atheists and Christians having dialogues together. Any kind of division that we can have among ideological groups. Let's say, can we have a conversation where we can get beyond those identities? So I think that the like neo-Nazi psychedelic sessions that needs to be kept an eye on, because those could be these substances could be used to unify and save the world and make us all healthier and happier, or they could make us go insane. So that's something just to keep an eye on, and really contribute your own thoughts to how could we overcome those phenomenons, and that inherent problem of we cannot accept other people for who they are. Can we medicate that is the question.
For sure. Thank you.
Is it my turn to ask a question?
Sure, go
Gotcha.
ahead.
Okay. I believe it's Foxy next again. All right. Someone asked, well, someone said, I love the term multidimensional integration. And then they asked, could you explain a bit more about what that means to you?
So the term multidimensional and integration, when coupling those two in this context, to me, what it means to me is more of a, okay, so transpersonal disciplines is a good way to kind of, a good place to start. Transpersonal disciplines do not exclude any other discipline. They kind of already integrate other disciplines, and you can apply transpersonal principles to other disciplines. Now, that's where things become a little bit more multidimensional, especially when you think about going beyond what is initially inherent in a discipline. Like, let's say the scientific method. How does the scientific method work? And why does it work the way that it works? Now, one way to kind of break that system open and start working on it from a different perspective is to think about how to decolonize it. Why do we always try and go for a simple solution in our science? Why do we try to think things the way that we think them? And so opening up the perspective and allowing other things to influence it to get a different result and to ask different questions, which wouldn't be inherent to the way that we would typically utilize any system that we're working through. Again, with like the scientific method. So coming up with a hypothesis kind of leads sometimes down a rabbit hole, and it can kind of be mind-blowing in some senses. So multidimensional for me would mean integrating different perspectives into your work, especially if it's like irking you, especially if it doesn't make any sense to your work, especially when it comes to doing the work of um, diversity, inclusion, and equity inside of a field, or applying critical race theory to the understanding of um, the perspective where you're coming from when you're asking and coming up with your hypothesis. And yeah, and some of this is very, very new for me, as I'm going into and deepening myself within the work uh, of a social worker, and going into newer spaces and looking into research. I'm just beginning to notice there's a bit of groupthink, and even in the social work community. And sometimes there are one or more perspectives that are like better, utilize, more ubiquitous than others. And so I'm starting to think like, okay, how do I step up inside of my field and um, embody the change that I want to see? And that's by understanding the rest of the perspectives. That's already a multi-dimensional aspect that I'm trying to go through and really get those and see where each one of those can be expanded on with transpersonal principles being applied to them, and how far can each one of these sociocultural, biosocial perspectives get looked at to embody transpersonal principles. And then, just kind of doing that work within your field allows things to become more multidimensional and a little bit more complex. And sometimes there can be beauty in that in itself, the nuances. And by you, the person there doing that work and activating not only yourself, but beyond yourself and the people that you work with, your field, that's the act of integration, of really embodying it and going beyond yourself. I mean, we're honestly doing that here during this Q&A, poking and prodding at ourselves and getting asked questions, and really doing the work of integrating our thoughts and our experiences and the experiences not our own, so that we can find new conclusions, iterations of ourselves and the things that we enjoy within our own work. Yeah, I think that's a fair answer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The question is for Jessica. Ernesto says, thank you for your talk, but I was wondering about what you think about Burning Man becoming a playground for rich people and billionaires to get together in a very exclusive way, creating a terrestrial neoliberal ideology linked to psychedelics, as critical voice Dr. Deveneaux points out. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I love and I appreciate it. I like that Burning Man does not exist outside of the problems of the rest of our culture. It's a playground and a petri dish through which to experiment with different ways of responding to them and different rituals and paradigms and ethos. But it is not, there's still the same issues. But I think there's problematic aspects of the amount of wealth at Burning Man, and the fact that it can bring privilege into that space the same way it brings privilege into other spaces. But I also, I don't necessarily reject that. I think it's awesome for billionaires to come to Burning Man. I think it's a great thing. I'm like, yes, come, please. Like, maybe there's some inspiration there. And I think of it similarly in a way with what David was saying. Like, let's really, what happens when we can we call in divergent perspectives and divergent holders of power into kind of an equalizing space, and a psychedelic space, and a space that promotes like an openness and an expansive way of thinking. So I think I do really love that aspect, and I know there's also the problematic pieces of it, and this huge part is access, and Burning Man might have this inclusivity as a principle, but it's also difficult when the rubber meets the road of what do you do with something where there's a limitation on how many people can attend. Like, how do you address these limited resources, where maybe the ideal is to call everyone in, but we don't all fit, so then what happens next? And these are really open questions for me, and I think for the larger community. And I do really love seeing the expansion of Burning Man culture into other places, other paradigms, the regional burns. And something I didn't address in my talk is that this kind of model of the temple has been taken to other spaces. David Best built a temple in Ireland that had a really deep healing impact there. And he's built other temples, in Florida and other places to address like specific traumas. So there's room for it to grow and expand. But I just to respond directly to the question, I think it's Burning Man is a microcosm of what's happening in the rest of the world, and I actually appreciate the response of calling people in, and I do hope that these billionaires that are coming out there are hopefully leaving with some new perspectives that they didn't come with.
Thank you.
And back to Christian again. Someone asked, do you think teens growing up with the internet and social media have more of a need for rites of passage than previous generations?
That's a very interesting question. I guess I wouldn't know how to quantify whether current modern teens need it more. I think that the need has always been there. And what we could be seeing with the lack of modern rites of passage is the fallout now of not having general transitions from childhood to adulthood. And the social media and technological innovations are kind of filling that gap, where it's been joked about for a long time that the television set is raising our children, that replaces the nanny in the modern household, and it's only accelerated greatly with the advent of the modern smartphone and the quick access to social media that turns the in-group identity development into a digital and online space. So yeah, I don't think I could say that we need it more than past cultures and civilizations or current cultures and civilizations that exist without social media, but I would say we need it, period. And I think that for many reasons, it could be a stalwart against the degradation of social cohesion and the fabric of what holds us together that's taking place because of modern technology in many ways. And here I'll emphasize that it's not just the in-group identity development that rites of passage develop, it's also the ecological identity, that the identity that is shared between people and the environment. And I think that, yeah, it's needed as much as it ever has been. I think the stakes are just a lot higher now because we have a global culture and we have the ability to destroy the planet very really with war and technology, and to destroy the social fabrics of all peoples. And so, yeah, that underscores the need for modern rites of passage. And I think the stakes have just become a lot higher, but we've always needed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, we are just about to wrap up on time, so just really quickly, we can go through everyone, and I'd like you to answer just in one sentence or in one phrase what you envision the future of the psychedelic space to be. That might be kind of a difficult question. We can start with William.
That is definitely a difficult question. I guess like in relation to my talk, since I was talking about sort of the conciliation between the clinic and the church, yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely going to take a kind of balance of both. And I think certain people are more prone to prefer a secular clinic over a ceremony, and other people are more prone to prefer an open ceremony rather than a secular clinic. I think it's also important to avoid corporatism in the clinical settings, to avoid sort of seeing patient as just a dollar, like a potential dollar to be made. Yeah, I don't know. Those are, I guess, just some open ways of seeing the future, but I don't know if I could concretely answer that question, to be honest. Yeah, so I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you. David?
Can I do a quote? Can I have a quote? So this is from Terrence McKenna. Where we really want to be is naked, singing in the rainforest, stoned and exalted. One with the souls of the ancestors, one with the Gaian spirit of the planet. That's what I see as the future of psychedelic therapy.
Love it. Jessica?
Well, I believe that the future of psychedelics, no matter what, will become more integrated into society. And I would hope, my vision for that is that it will be a curious, collaborative, embodied, and kind space. That's my hope for it.
Perfect. Foxy?
Where do I see the future of psychedelics? So that's a hard question. So I see the future of psychedelics really being a catalyst, a catalyst in ideas, and a catalyst in the ability to see the advantage of changing our systems and paradigms that we have that support us currently, and breaking them open gently, and allowing for new perspectives into the space, more inclusive perspectives, and diverse, while building up the community's ability to access these medicines, so that there's not just an internal systematic shift, but there's also an external emotional, spiritual, and collective shift for individuals. That's where I see the future of psychedelics being a shift for not just individuals, but community.
Love it.
Thank you.
And Christian.
I think in one word, it would be uncertainty. I think of it, so when I went to Psychedelic Science 2023 in Denver, I left there getting this impression that for decades, the modern psychedelic interest has been curated and even curtailed by the underground community. And this has been a very small population of people around the world. And as the theme with Psychedelic Science 2023 was mainstream psychedelics, I was seeing that this child had birthed, and it was a long and painful birthing process. But now that the child has birthed, there's a very short, just like with a real human child, there's a very short window of developmental consideration. Like, okay, we have this thing, it's in the world now, everyone's aware of it, but there will be a time when it's running or walking, crawling, walking, and then even running away from us. And as it runs away, it's going to be like a firestorm around the world, developing in whatever culture in whatever way it does, completely out of our control. And that's what I've kind of was my takeaway from Psychedelic Science 2023. And I really liken it to a disruptive technology as necessary and disruptive as the discovery of fire. And when we think about how fire sparked language, art, metallurgy, geometry, consciousness in general, spawned around human consciousness, spawned around the campfire. And I think that psychedelics can be very likened to fire and how they affect consciousness and how they create culture. But like fire, there's a huge amount of destructive capability. Fire can bring all of these things to our culture. It also kills people, and it also destroys whole forests, homes, and societies. So I think that's my takeaway is we will see what the fire brings.
All right, those are some words of wisdom as our parting words. Okay, well, I think that'll wrap it up for our Q&A session for today. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to the audience for all your wonderful questions. This has been a really interesting conversation.